People used to say Ryan and I were the couple everyone wanted to be. Elegant, in love, successful. The kind of marriage that made others believe fairy tales could exist in real life. Ryan had that magnetic charm that pulled people in. He could light up any room with his effortless confidence. And I played the role of the devoted, graceful wife perfectly, always smiling beside him at charity events, laughing at his jokes during dinners, keeping the house flawless, and making sure everything he touched turned to gold. For 8 long years, that's who we were. The perfect couple. At least, that's what the world saw. But perfection is like glass, beautiful to look at, but one hidden crack can make it all shatter. And mine began with silence. It started small. Ryan began coming home later, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. His phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now always face down, locked with a new passcode. His laughter, once warm and familiar, felt rehearsed. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was stressed with work, that maybe I was overthinking. But one night, I woke to the faint sound of his voice downstairs. The clock read 1:13 a.m. My heart sank. Curiosity and fear guided my steps. I crept halfway down the staircase, careful not to make the wood creak. The study door was slightly ajar, light spilling into the dark hallway. "I want everything done by the end of the month." Ryan's voice was calm, commanding. "She won't suspect a thing. Once she signs, I'll move the accounts, sell the house, and she'll be left with, well, nothing." My breath caught. He paused, then laughed. That same soft, familiar laugh I once adored. His lawyer's voice came through the speakerphone, muffled but clear enough. "Are you sure she won't notice? You're still living together." "Emily?" Ryan scoffed. "She's too trusting, too emotional. She thinks we're solid. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late." The words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I pressed a hand against my mouth to stop the sob from escaping. My knees trembled. I wanted to burst into the room and scream, to ask why, to demand how he could betray me so coldly after everything I'd given him. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside me whispering, "Don't let him see you break." I turned away, walking back upstairs with tears blurring my vision. Each step felt heavier than the last. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed where we had shared dreams, laughter, and promises, and stared at the man I thought I knew. In that moment, the illusion of my perfect marriage shattered into pieces. Memories flashed like cruel ghosts. The way he'd held my hand at our wedding, whispering, "I'll protect you always." The night we planned our future under the stars, making promises about children and forever. The first time he said, "You're my everything." Lies. Every word, every kiss, every touch, poisoned by greed. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at the shadows on the wall, feeling something inside me shift. The naive, loving wife who believed in him was gone. By sunrise, I wasn't crying anymore. My eyes were dry, my heart steady. Ryan came upstairs, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, kissing my forehead. "I have an early meeting. Don't wait up for me tonight." "Of course," I replied, forcing a soft smile. "Good luck, darling." He left without suspecting a thing, and as his car disappeared down the driveway, I whispered to myself, "You think you're planning something, Ryan? You have no idea what's coming." The betrayal that once felt like my destruction was about to become my weapon, because I realized something important that morning. If he could plan behind my back, so could I, and I would do it better. The morning after I overheard Ryan's plan, the world looked different. The same sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, but it didn't feel warm anymore. The same coffee machine hummed, but the aroma didn't comfort me. Everything I once built around him now felt like a stage, and I, the actress who had finally learned the script, wasn't hers to write. But if Ryan wanted to play a game, I was going to learn the rules and win. That morning, I made his favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with extra syrup. I smiled, asked about his schedule, even laughed at his jokes. He kissed my cheek before leaving, his tone casual, as if he hadn't planned to erase me from his life within weeks. As soon as his car left the driveway, I put down the coffee cup and called the only person I could trust, my godfather, Harold, a retired attorney who had known me since I was a child. "Emily?" he said gently when he heard my trembling voice. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, then the truth poured out like a flood. Every word Ryan said, every plan he made, I told Harold everything. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then his voice, calm and steady. "All right, dear. Then it's time we teach your husband that underestimating you was his biggest mistake." That afternoon I met Harold at his private office, a quiet space filled with leather books and the faint scent of old coffee. He reviewed the financial papers I brought, brows furrowing. "You've given him too much access," he said. "Every joint account, every shared investment, he's positioned to take almost everything." "I know," I whispered, ashamed. "I trusted him." Harold smiled sadly. "Trust is beautiful, but so is wisdom. Let's get you both." For hours we went through documents, properties, and account statements. My name appeared everywhere, but always tied to his. Every financial thread of my life had been woven around Ryan's control, but what Ryan didn't realize was that I still had something he couldn't touch: my late grandmother's inheritance. Hidden within that inheritance was a clause. It could be reclaimed solely under my maiden name, untouched by marital rights. We spent the next few days setting everything in motion. Quietly, carefully, I reactivated my maiden name's trust account and began transferring funds, a few thousand here, a few thousand there, just enough each day not to trigger suspicion. Harold drafted new legal documents placing my assets in a separate foundation, registered under a discreet holding name. Meanwhile, I played the part of the loving, oblivious wife perfectly. When Ryan came home, I was waiting at the door, smiling. When he spoke, I listened. I even suggested we plan a weekend getaway, to reconnect. He agreed, looking smug, thinking I was still lost in the fantasy of our marriage. Inside, I was fire and ice. Each night after he fell asleep, I sat in the study he thought was his domain. I went through files, emails, and company documents. I found hidden bank accounts, secret transfers to his lawyer's firm, and messages that made my stomach twist. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was stealing from me, moving assets we both built together into his private accounts, preparing to file before I could react. The anger that once threatened to drown me now sharpened into resolve. By the 5th day, I had moved nearly all my liquid assets. The house, though under both our names, had been refinanced through my grandmother's trust, meaning my signature was legally required for any sale or transfer. The art collection he flaunted at parties? Every piece had been bought with my money, and I had the original receipts to prove it. Harold chuckled when I showed him the files. "You're smarter than most of my clients," he said. "No," I replied quietly, "just finally awake." Ryan's behavior didn't change much that week. If anything, he seemed more affectionate. He brought home flowers, kissed my hand during dinner, even complimented my dress at an event. The performance was almost touching, if I didn't already know what lay behind it. But there were moments when I caught something in his eyes: calculation, impatience. He thought I was still naive, still waiting for his love to return. Each time I caught that look, it strengthened my resolve. The storm was building, quiet, invisible but powerful, and I was its center. By the end of the week, I had secured everything: the inheritance, transferred and protected; the bank accounts, frozen, rerouted, or closed; the legal trust, airtight; the evidence, neatly documented in a folder marked for court. All that was left was to wait, and as I stood by the window that final evening, watching Ryan's car pull into the driveway, a strange calm washed over me. The woman he thought he could destroy was gone. In her place stood someone he would never see coming. He walked in with his usual arrogance, greeted me with that charming grin, and said, "You look beautiful tonight, Em." I smiled sweetly, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Thank you, Ryan," I whispered. "I've been preparing for something special." He laughed, not knowing how true those words were. Because soon, everything he thought was his would be mine, and every plan he built to ruin me would become the foundation of his own downfall. The day Ryan finally made his move, the air felt strangely calm. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary, only to change your entire life by nightfall. I was pruning roses in the garden when I heard his car pull up. His engine always had that distinct hum, smooth and self-assured, like its owner. I wiped my hands on my apron and turned just as he stepped out, dressed immaculately in his navy suit, the one he wore when he wanted to look important. He walked toward me, envelope in hand, and that familiar smirk tugging at his lips. He said, voice soft, practiced, and full of false concern. Can we talk? I smiled faintly, pretending not to notice the envelope that practically screamed divorce papers. Of course, Ryan, I replied sweetly. You always know how to pick the most beautiful day for surprises. He hesitated a little, perhaps thrown off by my calmness. Then, with a sigh that sounded rehearsed, he handed me the envelope. I think you know what this is, he said. It's time we move on. Things haven't been working, and I think this is best for both of us. The words might have crushed me weeks ago, but now they barely grazed the surface of my composure. I opened the envelope, my fingers steady, and glanced through the neatly typed pages. Irreconcilable differences, it read. How poetic. Of course, I said softly, meeting his eyes. I understand. He blinked, visibly confused. You do? Of course, I repeated, folding the papers neatly. People grow apart, it happens. He seemed almost disappointed. Perhaps he'd expected tears or pleading, maybe even anger. But all he got was politeness. The silence stretched between us, awkward and hollow. He cleared his throat. I'll have my lawyer reach out. It should be straightforward. I've made sure everything is fair. I almost laughed at that. Fair. The word tasted like ash. Instead, I nodded. Thank you, Ryan. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. He hesitated, watching me as though trying to decode something. I really hope this can be peaceful. No drama, no bitterness. I smiled warmly. I wouldn't dream of it. And that was it. He left, strutting back to his car, completely convinced he had just ended things on his own terms. But 3 days later, the storm he never saw coming hit, and it hit hard. It began with a phone call. Not to me, to him. I was in the kitchen when I heard his raised voice from the hallway. What do you mean the accounts are frozen? He paused, listening. Then no, that's impossible. I just moved the funds last week. I kept stirring my tea, my lips curving upward ever so slightly. A few seconds later, what do you mean the property transfer didn't go through? She can't. It's our house. The panic in his tone was like music. By the time I walked into the living room, he was pacing back and forth, phone clutched tight in his hand, sweat beading his forehead. Fix it. He barked at whoever was on the other end. I want this resolved now. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Is everything okay? I asked innocently. He turned sharply, startled to see me there. No, everything is not okay, he snapped, then immediately softened his tone. It's just some legal confusion. Nothing to worry about. Oh, I said sweetly, sipping my tea. I'm sure it'll all work out. That night I received a call from Harold. It's done, he said simply. Every account, every document, all protected. He can't touch a cent. Perfect, I whispered. Now we wait. The next morning Ryan was gone before I woke. He'd driven straight to his lawyer's office, desperate for answers. By noon I got a text. Ryan, what did you do? Me, I'm not sure what you mean. Ryan, you moved everything. The house, the accounts, even the art. You can't just take what's mine. Me, you mean what was always mine? He didn't reply after that. But that evening I heard his car again. Slamming doors, angry footsteps. He burst through the front door, face flushed with rage and disbelief. You knew, he shouted. You knew the whole time, didn't you? I looked up from the book I was reading. Knew what, Ryan? He paced, hands in his hair. Don't play dumb with me. You moved the assets, you tricked me. Tricked you? I repeated slowly, standing up. Ryan, you planned to divorce me and take everything. You told your lawyer I'd walk away with nothing. His face turned pale. How? I heard you, I said quietly. That night, in the study. He stumbled back, disbelief written across his face. For the first time in years he looked small. Emily, he began, reaching for me. I didn't mean it. I was angry. I stepped back. Stop, don't insult me further. He froze. I gave you my love, my loyalty, my trust, I said, my voice steady but cold. You planned to take my security, my future, my dignity. But instead you taught me how to protect myself. So thank you, Ryan, for the lesson. He opened his mouth, but no words came. You wanted a divorce, I said, walking toward the door. You'll get it, but this time you'll walk away with nothing. He stood there in silence as I opened the door for him, motioning politely. "Good night, Ryan." He hesitated, his face contorting with anger, humiliation, and disbelief. Then he walked out, his footsteps echoing down the marble path like the sound of a man losing everything he thought he controlled. When the door closed behind him, I leaned against it and exhaled. Not in sadness, but relief, because that was the moment I finally understood something profound. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It could be quiet, graceful, and precise, like a knife sliding between lies. And Ryan had just felt every inch of it. The weeks after Ryan stormed out were quiet, unnervingly so. The house that once echoed with his footsteps and his booming laughter now held only silence, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was peaceful, clean. For the first time in years I could breathe without feeling watched. Ryan, on the other hand, was unraveling. I didn't need to see it firsthand. The world around us was small enough for whispers to travel fast. His company, the one he'd bragged about building from nothing, began to crumble when investors backed out. The divorce filing had stirred curiosity, and soon enough, people found out that his financial dealings weren't as spotless as he'd claimed. Apparently, when your assets disappear overnight and your soon-to-be ex-wife produces evidence of your secret accounts, the business world starts asking questions. Ryan tried to call me several times. I ignored every one. Then, one afternoon, I received an email from his lawyer, a man who now sounded a lot less confident than he had in Ryan's recorded call. "Mrs. Sinclair, my client wishes to reach a private settlement. He would like to apologize and requests to meet." Apologize. The word almost made me laugh. I agreed to the meeting, not out of forgiveness, but closure. We met at a small cafe, neutral territory. Ryan was already there, sitting in the corner, wearing a suit that looked wrinkled and tired, much like the man himself. His hair, once perfectly styled, had streaks of gray showing. His hands fidgeted with his cup, the confidence that once defined him completely gone. "Emily," he began softly, "you look good." I sat down across from him, calm as still water. "Thank you, Ryan. You don't." He winced but didn't argue. "I deserve that," he muttered. For a moment we just sat there in silence. Then he sighed. "I lost everything, Em. The company, the house, the cars. Even the board turned on me. I just wanted a fresh start. I didn't mean to hurt you." I tilted my head, studying him. "You didn't mean to hurt me? You planned to leave me with nothing, Ryan. You drew up contracts, hired lawyers, and even timed your filing to coincide with your company's biggest payout. That's not a mistake. That's intent." He swallowed hard, unable to meet my eyes. "I just thought..." He paused, his voice cracking. "I thought I could handle everything on my own. That you'd be fine, you always land on your feet. Because I make sure I do," I said sharply. "Not because you ever helped me." He finally looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not anger, but genuine regret. "I'm sorry, Emily," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did. What I lost." I nodded slowly. "Good. Because you didn't just lose your money, Ryan. You lost me, and that's the one thing you'll never get back." He nodded, eyes glistening. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me," he whispered. "I know," I said softly, standing up. "That's why you'll never forget me." And I walked away. The divorce finalized 2 months later. The judge ruled in my favor. Full ownership of the properties, assets, and even a small portion of his remaining company shares. When the decision was read aloud, Ryan didn't look up. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the sunlight hit my face, warm and golden. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting it wash over me. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace. I didn't want revenge anymore. I'd already taken it, not through cruelty or public humiliation, but through survival, through strength. I had turned the very weapon he forged against me into my shield. But I wanted to do more than just live. I wanted to build. So I did. With Harold's help, I founded a nonprofit organization for women blindsided by financial betrayal. I called it the Phoenix Fund, because every woman I helped reminded me of what it meant to rise from ashes. The first time I walked into our small office, walls covered in sunlight, women smiling as they worked, I felt something deep inside me heal. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, All of it had been transformed into purpose. Ryan's name never came up again, though sometimes I heard about him through friends. He'd moved into a small apartment, started consulting for minor firms. The man who once stood at the top of his world was now a quiet shadow of himself. But I never wished him pain, because true revenge isn't watching someone else fall. It's rising so high that they can't even see you anymore. A year later, I hosted a charity gala for the Phoenix Fund. The ballroom was stunning. White roses, golden light, laughter echoing against the marble walls. As I stepped onto the stage to deliver my speech, I caught a glimpse of someone standing near the entrance. Ryan. He stood silently watching. His expression wasn't bitter or angry, just hollow. When our eyes met, he nodded once, as if to say, "I understand now." I smiled, not for him, but for me. Then I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady and proud. "Betrayal doesn't destroy you," I said into the microphone. "It reveals who you truly are. And when you choose to rebuild, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself, you win a kind of victory no one can take away." The room erupted in applause. And as I looked around, at the women whose lives we'd changed, at the hope we'd built from brokenness, I realized something beautiful. Ryan had taken so much from me, my trust, my peace, my belief in forever. But in trying to destroy me, he'd given me the greatest gift of all. Myself. The woman who once lived for love now lived for strength, for purpose, for freedom. That night, as I stood beneath the golden lights, I whispered to myself the words that had carried me through everything. The sweetest revenge isn't in making them suffer. It's in making yourself unbreakable.